They said if you are soft enough, quiet enough, beautiful enough, he will stay. They said if you make yourself pleasing, if you keep the peace, if you don't ask for too much, you will be loved. They said if you become the kind of woman a man can handle, he will choose you. And you tried. You softened your edges until your voice vanished. You gave your body while your soul screamed no. You walked barefoot through glass, through silence, through shame, believing that sacrifice would earn you devotion, but it never did. Because a woman who doesn't know herself is always trying to become what others will value. And that, my love, is the perfect way to be owned. Not through chains, but through the subtle violence of praise, performance, and possession. But there comes a moment in every woman's life when her soul revolts, not in anger, in clarity. She looks in the mirror, and for the first time, she doesn't ask, will he stay if I become smaller? She asks, why did I ever need to be owned at all? And that, beloved, is the moment of liberation, not loud, not triumphant, but terrifying and holy. Because once a woman knows herself truly, viscerally, soulfully, she can never be owned again. These are the just 7 inner truths. Every woman awakens when she stops being a reflection and starts becoming a force. This is the story of a woman who became unpossessable. She no longer fears being alone. She fears abandoning herself. In the beginning, she confused attention with intimacy. She clung to proximity like oxygen. She accepted half presence, quarter love, and the occasional apology dressed as affection, because the fear of aloneness felt unbearable. But then, silence became sanctuary. She sat with her ache. She learned the language of her body. She listened to the part of her that had been begging her to stop. And in that stillness, something ancient returned. She realized that the loneliest place was not being without him. It was being disconnected from herself. Now she doesn't stay to be held. She stays because she is held. Internally, her solitude is no longer punishment. It is power. She no longer confuses possession with devotion. He said he loved her, but his love was surveillance. His care was control wrapped in compliments. He needed to know where she was, what she wore, how she spoke, who she smiled at. He said he adored her wildness until it became inconvenient, until her joy wasn't always directed at him, until her desires weren't always about pleasing him. That's when she saw it. He didn't love her. He loved owning her. And love, true love, cannot survive in captivity. Now she no longer melts at the sound of "you're mine." She listens for "I see you, I honor you, I choose you," freely, because she is not a petal to be picked. She is a storm to be witnessed. She no longer performs femininity to be safe. There was a time when she smiled to soothe tension, when she crossed her legs, lowered her voice, made herself small so men wouldn't feel threatened. She was polite when she was violated. She was forgiving when she was erased. She said, "I'm fine," when she was disappearing, because she learned young that being soft and pleasing meant staying alive. But now, she has remembered the wild woman, the one who howls truth in rooms built on lies, the one who dances on her own terms, the one who does not shrink to be touched. She is not feminine in the way patriarchy prefers. She is feminine in the way forests burn and rivers flood. She is the kind of woman you don't own, you revere. She no longer confuses approval with worth. Once, she lived for applause, for messages that said, "You're amazing," for eyes that lingered and smiles that approved. She dressed for the gaze. She spoke for acceptance. She built her value on reflections until her identity was nothing but glass. But mirrors crack, and silence taught her something validation never. Good, her worth does not live in someone else's eyes. It lives in her spine. Now, She speaks and doesn't check who's listening. She dances and doesn't ask who's watching. She creates, not for praise, but because her soul has something to say, and that kind of woman, who needs no witness to be real, cannot be seduced by surface. She no longer trades her body for closeness. She used to think intimacy meant access. If she opened her body, maybe he would open his heart. If she said yes with her skin, maybe he would finally say yes with his soul. But he didn't. He took, he praised, he lingered, but he never truly met her, because you can't meet a woman you only consume. Now, her body is not a bargaining chip. It is a temple. She doesn't offer it to be loved. She offers it when she is love already. And if he cannot sit in silence with her mind, he will not taste the thunder of her body, because this woman is no longer a performance. She is a prayer. She no longer makes herself smaller to be chosen. He told her she was too much, too emotional, too intense, too complicated, so she became less. She paused before sharing. She laughed a little softer. She swallowed her truth one syllable at a time, until she realized the ones who say you're too much are simply too small to hold your magic. Now, she's done apologizing for her fullness. She cries deeply, loves boldly, speaks with flame. She takes up space like she was born to, because she was. And the right ones won't ask her to shrink. They'll expand beside her. She no longer confuses her pain with purpose. She believed love meant effort. The more it hurt, the more it must be real. She wore suffering like a badge. She said, love is hard, when it was really just unavailable. But healing showed her otherwise. Love doesn't have to bruise. Devotion doesn't have to drain. Presence doesn't have to be earned. Now she no longer mistakes chaos for chemistry. She no longer chases storms and calls it passion. She wants peace now, not boredom. Peace. The kind of love that feels like truth, not a test. Because a woman who knows herself no longer needs to bleed to feel alive. She has remembered that her joy is sacred, that her soul is not up for negotiation, that her love is not a leash, it is a light. And those who try to own her will only burn their hands, because you cannot own the ocean. You can only surrender to its tide. There's a silence that follows her awakening, not the silence of loss, but the silence of arrival. She no longer asks for directions. She doesn't beg for validation. She doesn't explain her rhythm, her timing, her inner storms. Because once a woman knows herself, she no longer lives to be understood. She lives to be whole. And from that wholeness, she doesn't just stop being owned, she becomes unshakably sovereign. This is not the story of resistance. This is the story of return. These are the next 7 truths she integrates as she no longer hides from her power, but begins to embody it. She no longer romanticizes potential. She honors what's real. There was a time when she loved a man's potential more than his presence. She saw the gold beneath his wounds, the softness behind his defenses, the man he could become if only he would try. And so she tried for both of them. She stayed when it drained her. She gave when it broke her. She forgave when it erased her, because she believed that loving harder could heal him. But now, she's done loving ideas. She wants a man who shows up in the now, not in a fantasy of someday. She no longer projects greatness onto unavailable hearts. She recognizes who's here, not who she wishes was. And if presence doesn't match promise, she walks away. With grace, because her love is no longer a rehabilitation center, it is a realm, and only those who are ready to rise may enter. She no longer tries to be the medicine for the masculine. For lifetimes, she played healer, the empath who held his rage, the goddess who soothed his shame, the nurturer who became his emotional home even when he never became hers. She thought love meant absorbing pain, But now, she has put down the bandages. She has returned his broken pieces back to him, not out of coldness, but out of respect. Because she sees now, she was never meant to be his mother. She is not here to fix the masculine. She is here to reflect him back to himself, truthfully, and her truth is this: the woman who always heals him never gets to be held. Now she holds herself, and the man who joins her must come whole. She no longer edits her intuition to be more digestible. She used to doubt her knowing. She'd feel a whisper of warning in her gut, but override it with politeness. She'd sense deception in a smile, but force herself to believe the words, because the world taught her to mistrust her body, to call her sensitivity irrational, her fear overreactive, her wisdom dramatic. But now, she trusts the tremor in her belly more than the promise on his lips. Her intuition is her compass, her sword, her sanctuary, and if her inner voice says no, she doesn't need evidence. She listens. Because the feminine that knows herself doesn't need to prove why she walks away. Her body said enough, and that's sacred law. She no longer molds her magic to avoid rejection. Once, she toned herself down to be chosen. She dimmed her insight. She softened her passion. She made herself a shade more manageable because she feared being left. But being left is no longer her fear. Being dimmed is now. Her light doesn't wait for permission. It rises on instinct. She speaks the truth that cracks illusions. She offers the kind of presence that cannot be contained. She walks with a fire that either ignites or repels. And she's okay with that because her life is no longer an audition. It's a remembering, and the ones who love her now don't try to tame her. They protect her flame. She no longer collapses for connection. In the past, she confused love with merging. She gave all of herself too fast, believing that to be close meant to be consumed. She forgot where she ended and he began. But now, she stays rooted even in intimacy. She holds her shape while holding space. She offers connection without collapsing her center because she no longer mistakes codependence for closeness. She knows now. True intimacy doesn't require fusion. It honors boundaries. It respects autonomy. It breathes. And the man who meets her now doesn't demand access to her every corner. He cherishes the fact that some parts of her remain wild, untouched, holy. She no longer fears her cyclical nature. She was taught to be consistent, predictable, easy to manage, to smile when she was sad, to say yes when she needed rest. But she's a woman, a moon, a tide, a breathing contradiction of stillness and fire, and she no longer apologizes for it. She doesn't perform stability at the cost of her truth. She doesn't strive to be linear in a spiral-shaped soul. She honors the days she bleeds, the nights she howls, the hours she needs silence more than touch. She does not hide her storms. She moves with them because the feminine is not meant to be consistent. She is meant to be true. And only those who can dance with her rhythm will ever feel the depth of her devotion. She no longer sees her love as a debt owed. Her heart used to ache when her giving wasn't reciprocated, when her depth was met with distance, when her honesty was met with deflection. She felt robbed, hollowed, taken for granted. But she sees now her love was never wasted. It was never a transaction. It was an offering. And while he may not have known what to do with it, she does. She knows that her capacity to love deeply is not a weakness. It's a power, and it's not owed anything. Now, she gives from overflow, not emptiness. And if her love is not honored, she doesn't demand repayment. She simply withdraws it, because the woman who knows herself does not beg to be met. She opens and lets life rise to meet her, or it doesn't. Either way, she remains rooted, unshaken, unowned, unapologetically herself. There is a moment when the storm passes, when the woman who shattered her old self, who sat in silence, who rose through the fire, no longer feels the need to explain her transformation. She simply lives it, not louder, but deeper. She doesn't speak of her power. She moves with it. She doesn't announce her healing. She breathes it into every room she enters. She doesn't teach her boundaries. They are felt in her presence before a word is spoken. This is the final return, not to the past, not to the familiar, but to her soul, to the knowing that she is whole, without needing to be held, that she is sacred without needing to be seen, that she is sovereign without needing to be feared. These are the 7 integrations of a woman who has remembered that she was never meant to be owned. She makes peace with being misunderstood. She no longer needs to be liked. She no longer needs to be gotten. She no longer dilutes her expression to soften her truth. She knows some will call her cold. Some will label her selfish. Some will say she changed, and she did. She changed from someone who needed approval to survive, to someone who chooses authenticity over applause. Now, if her truth offends, she doesn't shrink, she doesn't defend, she lets it, because she no longer trades her peace for comfort. Let them misunderstand her. She no longer builds her identity out of other people's projections. She is not a brand, she is a soul. She redefines what love feels like. Love used to be adrenaline, anxiety, longing, proving. She thought love was what made her ache, what made her chase, what made her disappear into someone else's desire. But that wasn't love, that was trauma reenactment. Now, love feels like ease, like resonance, like being seen without being consumed. It feels like space, like stillness, like a hand reaching for hers with no need to fix or possess. She no longer calls the familiar ache passion. She calls it what it is, a reminder of everything she's already outgrown. She holds her standards with grace, not shame. Before, she'd feel guilty for asking for more, for naming her needs, for not accepting less than presence, depth, consistency. She worried she was being high maintenance, too rigid, too intense. But now she understands. Standards are not punishments, they are protection. Her boundaries are not tests, they are invitations. She doesn't shame anyone for not rising. She just doesn't lower herself to make them comfortable. Love is no longer an audition, it's a threshold, and those who meet her in fullness are met in ways she no longer has to explain. She embodies her sensuality without seeking permission. Her sensuality is no longer a tool for validation. It's not bait, it's not a strategy, it is sacred. She no longer performs eroticism for approval. She lives it for herself, in her walk, in her breath, in the way she drinks tea or greets the moonlight. She is not here to be ogled. She is here to be felt by those who can feel her truth and the ones who cannot. They are not her concern, because her sensuality is not for the masses, it is for her own aliveness. She moves through life with reverence, not rush. She used to chase, rush to answer, rush to fix, rush to respond, so no one would feel abandoned. But now, she moves slowly, intentionally with grace. She no longer fills silences with apologies. She no longer fills space just to be safe. She walks with the weight of her own soul and lets the world adjust to her pace, because speed is not her power. Presence is, and the right ones will never ask her to hurry. They will slow down to feel her. She creates from wholeness, not hunger. She used to create to be seen, to be needed, to be praised. Now, she creates from overflow, not because she has to prove she exists, but because her soul cannot stay silent. Her voice has found its frequency. Her gifts are no longer negotiable. Her art, her work, her offerings, are extensions of her remembrance. She no longer hustles for worth, she births from alignment, and that is what makes her magnetic. She blesses what leaves and bows to what stays. Not everything can walk with her now, not every lover, not every friend, not every story, and she no longer tries to force it. She has outgrown the need to explain why she's letting go. She has made peace with loss, because what leaves her now was never anchored in truth, and what stays, stays freely. No leashes, no guilt, no possession, just resonance, just soul, just the quiet knowing. I am mine, and that is enough. That is everything, because a woman who knows herself no longer fears being unchosen. She chooses. She chooses stillness, she chooses truth, she chooses sovereignty, she chooses love that never asks her to disappear, and to the ones who tried to own her, she leaves behind this truth. You cannot own a woman who belongs to herself. You cannot cage a soul who answers only to her source. And you cannot keep a goddess by making her small. She is not yours to keep. She is hers to become forever.